Welcome back to Project Montero. We're still having a misfire in the engine, and I think I've tracked it to the fuel injectors, so let's pull those out today and see if we can freshen them up a bit. And the first step for this project is removing the intake manifold, and this should take you anywhere from 10 to 30 minutes if you've never done it before. I do have a how-to video on how to remove it in 10 minutes. I'll link that into the description below, and you can follow along. Just keep in mind that this is the 3.5 liter engine on a 99, so if you have a 2000 or newer, or you have the 3 liter engine, some of the components in the engine bay might be in a slightly different spot, but the concept is still the same. And once that intake manifold is off, there are 4 12mm bolts that are holding the fuel rail on right here. And once those 4 bolts are out, there are 6 electrical connectors that are going into each injector. Just pinch the tab and pull each one of those out. And yours may be different, but my fuel rail and the wiring harness were zip tied together right here, and I was having a hard time moving them around the way I needed to, so I just clipped that zip tie, and I figured I could add a new one later if I needed to. But once all the electrical is disconnected, you should be able to slide the fuel rail out along with the 6 injectors. Some of them may fall out because they're just being held on with friction right now. And just note, you may lose some residual fuel that's left over in the rail. And another note is very important that you do not lose these small black spacers that sit underneath the rail. They will fall off and you will never find them. And so before I got too deep into this, I wanted to check and see if the injectors are spraying at all. So I plugged back in the electrical and just let them spray on this cardboard, and I noted here that the spray pattern is only coming out of 2 holes instead of the 4 that it's supposed to, so I'm figuring that's where my misfire is. Because my theory is that the gunk from the old fuel tank made it through the line and is clogging the injectors, so let's see if we can get those cleaned out and get the fuel flowing again. And full disclaimer, you're about to see a lot of redneckery, and I'm sure there are better ways to do this, but this is just the way that I figured out to make it work. And these are the supplies that you'll need. You'll need some rubber hose, some brake cleaner, some vice grips, and some alligator test leads. And ideally, that rubber hose, you want the diameter to be big enough to fit over the injector opening. So I just started by cleaning the exterior of the injector first with the brake cleaner, and then I clamped the straw for the brake cleaner into one end of that rubber hose using a vice grip. Be careful not to clamp it too tight and collapse the straw, but then once you have that done, you can connect the brake cleaner to the straw. That half of your setup is done. And then on the other end of the rubber hose, you want to connect your fuel injector on the inlet side, and then you'll connect your alligator test leads to the electrical prongs of the injector, and then you'll connect your positive to the positive post of the battery, and then hold off on the negative post for just a second, because this is where you're going to wish you had 3 hands. You're going to want to pressurize that rubber hose by spraying the brake cleaner with one hand and then pulsing the negative terminal of the battery with your other hand, and if you have the right finesse, then you should get the brake cleaner spraying out of the injector like this. So I just repeated this process 6 times until all the injectors were spraying perfectly. And then it was time to move on to the seals. And for these I ended up going with rockauto.com, the standard motor products, part number SK97, and they're only $4 a piece. One set serves 1 injector, so I just got 6 sets. And if you're not able to get your injectors to come back around, there are a couple of options on rockauto.com. You can get a remanufactured one from JB Manufacturing. The part number is there, and they run about $38 a piece. Or if you opted to go new, Standard Motor Products does have a new one for $123 per injector. It's a little steep, and unfortunately Mitsubishi has discontinued their OEM injectors. And originally, I didn't plan on replacing the seals, but this is what happened when I tried to reinstall them without replacing the seals. They weren't leaking beforehand, but after I'd cleaned them up, they just weren't the same again. So I just replaced the seals on all 6 and didn't have a problem after that. Replacing the seals are really simple. There are 3 components that come in each set. Just pull off the old ones and replace it with the new ones. And then to reassemble, you'll start by placing all of the injectors with the spray side into the combustion chamber opening, and then placing the fuel rail on top of the injectors, not forgetting those black spacers. And then step 3 will be replacing those 4 12mm bolts and tightening them down anywhere between 100 and 150 inch-pounds. They don't have to be super tight. And then plug in each of the electrical connectors to each one of the injectors. And don't forget to check for leaks before you get that whole intake manifold back on. And this is as far as we're going to go on the fuel and ignition system right now. The spark plugs are sparking and the fuel is flowing. I did order a fuel pump, but I don't think we need to put it in right now. I'm just going to let the OEM fuel pump go as long as I can. On the next series, we're going to be knocking out the braking system, and then we'll move on to steering and suspension. So stay tuned to Project Montero, and we'll see you next week.